Hey, it's Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader, and welcome to the Black Belt Leadership Podcast, where each week I'm giving you tips, tools, insights, and resources to help you become a better version of who you are and what you do as you discover, develop, and deploy your own Black Belt leader within. Hey, I recently had an opportunity to visit a vineyard and learn a little bit about the process of winemaking, and I found it a fascinating opportunity to learn. And you guessed it, there's a lesson there we're going to talk about today. Now, the process of winemaking, if you're not familiar with it, is a timeless tradition that dates back centuries. Many archaeological findings have to suggest that grape cultivation and winemaking probably originated in ancient Mesopotamia in areas near the Caspian Sea, somewhere between 6,000 and 4,000 BC. Specifically, the regions of Georgia and Iran are considered by many archaeologists to be some of the earliest locations for winemaking because there it's where they found some of the earliest remains of wine-making vessels as they've been going through various archaeological digs. Now, if you're not familiar with the process of winemaking, it starts with the harvesting of grapes from the vineyard at the peak of their freshness. Those grapes are then squeezed. It's a process of crushing the grape to release the juice. Now, this juice is referred to in winemaking terms as must. But during the fermentation process, where wine is made, naturally occurring yeast in the grapes, or yeast that is added by the winemaker in a process called inoculation, that yeast begins to consume the sugar within the grape juice. Now, these sugars are converted to alcohol and carbon dioxide. Now, wine begins to expand during the fermentation process, primarily due to the release of CO2. Now, CO2, carbon dioxide, is a byproduct of yeast converting sugar to alcohol. Now, this gas occupies space and it increases the overall volume of the liquid itself. Now, in addition to that, as the wine is going through a fermentation process, the temperature begins to rise. It's an exothermic process that heat also causes a further expansion of the liquid. Now, something else I learned is touring this vineyard is that a winemaker will often take a wine, usually a red wine, through a secondary fermentation process to remove some of the acidity of the taste. Now, this is a process known as malolactic fermentation. And what it does, according to the winemaker, is it gives the wine a smoother, less tart taste. Now, once the fermentation process is completed, in modern days, the wine is stored in a large barrel or a vat to preserve its flavor. And it's during this process that the flavor of the wine can be enhanced with additional flavors such as vanilla or spice or toast. But in ancient times, barrels and vats may not have been available, or there may have been a need to transport wine in smaller quantities, even as it was fermenting, so they utilized various vessels to do so. And in ancient times, one of the most common that we discover was the wineskin. Now, the wineskin is one of the oldest vessels that we know has been used by humans throughout history. A wineskin originally was typically made from the bladder or the tan skin of an animal, often a goat. That skin or that bladder would be sewn into a bag-like shape and it would be treated so that it would be watertight. Now, as we dig through ancient writings and ancient murals, we see that wineskins were used in celebrations like the Bacchanania, which was dedicated to the god Bacchus, where goat sacrifices were common, and the skins of those goats were used to conserve and preserve the wine. Now, other ancient cultures, like the Egyptians, also utilized wineskins for storing liquids, not just wine, but also milk and water. The elasticity of the skin itself allowed the wine, as it expanded and fermented and the gases were produced, it allowed that wine to remain intact because the skin would stretch, allowing that wine to expand. Now, this was a crucial factor in preventing the container itself from bursting. Now, while less common today, in some traditional winemaking regions around the world, we still see wineskins being used, especially for rustic or simple wines. For example, in Spain, I learned that large wineskins, known as cuero, or smaller drinking bags, known as bota divina, are also used even today to hold and transport wine. Now, by the first century AD, wineskins were commonplace, not only for royalty, but also for the common man. Now, today we would think of a wineskin as a precursor, an early precursor to today's modern canteen. It was a very convenient, very affordable way and a very effective way to transport various liquids, wine, water, milk, and other liquids in ancient times, as long as certain precautions were taken. Now, remember what I said, wine is one of the few liquids that expands during the fermentation process. New wineskins were flexible, and so they could expand as the wine fermented. However, once a wineskin had been used and it had been stretched to its limit, over time, it would become brittle and it would be prone to bursting if it was refilled with new fermenting wine that would expand over time. So there was a rule of thumb in ancient cultures that new wine was never poured into an old wineskin for this reason. Because as the wine fermented, both the wine and the wineskin would be lost if the brittle leather burst under pressure. New wine required a new wineskin, so both could be preserved. Now, here's where, and if you haven't picked up already, here's where we lean into today's lesson. In the same way that new wine needs room to expand, this very same principle applies to new thoughts and new ideas that are shaping in your mind. These new thoughts, these new ideas, they too need a space to ferment. They need a place to expand, to enlarge, and to enrich. But if new thoughts and new ideas are constrained in our thinking, guess what? They can never fully develop. Now, old thoughts and old ideas are like old wine. They've already been through the process. And once the fermentation process of thinking has been completed, well, that thought is aged, just as a new wine is aged once the fermentation process is done. Now, this aging process preserves the wine's flavor and taste. Now, the aging process can add some flavor, as I said, like vanilla or spice, but the primary role of aging is to preserve the wine's flavor and taste. It's a tweak. It's nothing more. So by the very same token, and I hope you're seeing this already, old thoughts and old ideas, they can be tweaked or adapted, but they can't go through the fermentation process again. Once an idea is fully developed, it's as developed as it's ever going to be. Now, at one time, that idea was a new idea, and as it was developed and cultivated and enriched and grown and went through that fermentation process in our thinking, it fully developed into an idea that we could use. But after we fully developed that idea has served its purpose. While it's preserved in our thinking, it's still an old idea from the past. It can be tweaked, it can be adapted, but it really can't do much more than it's already done. So if you're restricting your thinking to only old established thoughts and ideas, you're choosing to remain in the safe zone. You're choosing to remain with what's familiar and what you already know. And that begs the question, where's the innovation in that? Where's the opportunity to learn and to grow and become a better version of who you are and what you do? Because if you do the same thing the same way over and over again, how can you expect a different outcome? You can't. That old idea that you continue to cultivate, that's already been fully developed, that you're thinking about over and over again, may have been a good thought or a good idea at the time, but now it's an old established idea that adds nothing new to your thought process. So, like a new wine, a new thought or a new idea has to go through a process of maturation. Thoughts and ideas that you and I have, they need time to ferment. They need time to grow and cultivate in our thinking so we can fully release and reveal their potential as we take time to nurture, to cultivate, and to add to those thoughts. Now, understand that new thoughts and new ideas, like a wine, can only come to their fullness, and we can fully develop those ideas and those thoughts as they go through a maturation process in our thinking. Now, this maturation process, just like the development of a wine and the fermentation process that wine goes through, the maturation process of our thinking takes time. But it also requires room for growth and room for expansion. Now, it's important to remember that growth is a process, and growth is going to require the stretching of the container where growth takes place, and that growth takes place in your mind. Now, a closed mindset is like an old wineskin. While it was once flexible and adaptable, it's now become stretched to its self imposed limits. Did you hear what I said? A closed mindset, while once flexible and adaptable, has now been stretched to its self imposed limits, the limits that you have placed on your thinking. And as such, a closed minded individual leaves no room for new thoughts or new ideas to expand, to ferment, or to grow. It's that we've always done it this way, why change attitude that permeates the status quo mindset of an individual whose mind is closed. I'm talking about the mind that's always stuck in the past, that's unwilling to learn, unwilling to adapt, and is content reliving yesterday's wins and yesterday's losses. Now, I'm talking about the mindset that says, I've reached my limit and I will go no further. Self imposed limitations. Now, while these individuals mistakenly believe they're okay with remaining as they are, what they don't realize is this: the world is continuing to move forward, and it's continuing to move forward without them. And by choosing to remain where they are, as they are, unchanged, these individuals don't realize that by standing still, they're actually moving backward as the world relentlessly surges forward. Now, by the same token, an open mindset is like a new wineskin. It's flexible, it's adaptable, and it allows the contents of thoughts and ideas, new thoughts, new ideas, it gives them room to expand and to grow. And rather than fighting against change, an open mindset molds and adapts itself as the content itself, new thoughts, new ideas, go through a fermentation, a maturation process. Now, I'm talking about the mindset that isn't willing to settle for yesterday's wins, a mindset that isn't willing to live in the comfort zone and isn't okay with the status quo. This is the mindset that's always asking, what's next? Or is there a better way? Now, an open mindset remains pliable, moldable, and adaptable. It's always curious because curiosity creates a mind that's open to learning. An open mindset continually makes room for growth and expansion. It constantly reminds itself, I've yet to reach my full potential. Let's keep learning and growing. Now, there's several distinctions between having a closed mind and an open mind, and I want to spend a moment or two touching on those. Let's start with the closed mind. An individual with a closed mind is characterized by resistance to change and a reluctance to consider alternate viewpoints. Individuals with a closed mind tend to be dismissive of new information. They tend to be opposed to any viewpoint that contradicts their own. They prefer what's familiar over the unknown, and they prefer to live their lives in the mediocrity of the status quo. Now, a closed-minded individual often become defensive when faced with criticism or opposing viewpoints they may not agree with because of their own self-imposed limitations. These individuals are resistant to new ideas and any perspective that challenges their conventional wisdom, what they believe to be true. These closed-minded individuals are going to focus on defending their existing beliefs rather than questioning them and seeing, is there a better way? They're more concerned with being right than being open to learning something new. These individuals lack intellectual humility. Now, what do I mean by that? These individuals are unwilling to admit that they're wrong. They're also resistant to any alternate view or any perspective that challenges what they believe to be true. They only see the world in the shape of their way, rather than their way being one of many ways to get something done. Again, right rather than truth. They resist change. They struggle to adapt to new situations. So, like an old wineskin, these individuals remain flexible, unwilling to adapt to the changing world around them, and they choose to remain where they are, as they are, unchanged. Now, by contrast, an individual with an open mind is going to be receptive. They're going to be receptive to new ideas, and they're going to be open to hearing alternative perspectives because life is all about learning and growing. Open-minded individuals are actively seeking out and considering diverse viewpoints, understanding and seeing the world through the eyes of different people who see the world differently from them so they can gain a broader understanding of the world around them. Open-minded people recognize there's always something to learn each and every day, and there's always something to learn from the individuals that they engage with every single day, as long as they're open and willing to learn. What I love about open-minded individuals is the fact that they're driven by a desire to learn and to grow, even if that means changing an opinion or a limiting belief that's holding them back. Now, open-minded individuals are also curious and they're flexible. They view challenges as opportunities for growth. They see feedback as a valuable tool for self-improvement. Curiosity drives them to seek a deeper understanding of the world around them. They are driven to see the people that they interact with throughout the day as an opportunity to learn or to gain a different perspective or to see the world a little bit differently and add the collective wisdom and knowledge of other people to their own. For the open-minded person, daily growth is not an option. Now, unlike their closed-minded counterparts, open-minded individuals openly acknowledge they don't know it all. They are open, they are willing to learn. This is how they live life. They practice intellectual humility, being willing to admit they don't know it all, and they're open and willing to learn. Open-minded individuals are willing to adjust their thinking, they're willing to adjust their behavior as new information becomes available, and they process it, and they sort it, and they validate it, and make it a part of their thinking. So like a new wineskin, they remain flexible, and they remain adaptable to change. Now, history has taught us you don't put new wine in an old wineskin. Historically, that's a recipe for disaster. The same is true for close-minded people. You don't waste new thoughts and new ideas on close-minded people. But I'm here to give you a little bit of good news. Old wineskins don't have to remain old. I learned in touring this winery that an old wineskin can be reconditioned so that it can be reused. As you go through the reconditioning process, they clean this leather pouch. And this cleaning process not only removes dirt and debris, it restores the elasticity of the leather so that it can flex and stretch and enlarge once again. Reconditioning and the process of going through this reconditioning process for a wineskin makes it like new once again. And that same truth can be applied to a close-minded individual. So if you find yourself, having heard me share today, leaning and finding yourself more in the world of the closed-minded than the open-minded, I've got some good news. If you're willing to go through the process of reconditioning your mindset, removing the impurities that are limiting your thinking, you too can open your mind. You can learn to seek out, to uncover, and to embrace new thoughts and new ideas. You can create the space within your thinking for those new thoughts and those new ideas to expand and ferment and mature and grow. And in the process, it's going to stretch those thoughts and ideas, and it's going to stretch you in new and better ways. Remember, old wineskins were once new. They just became old because nobody took the time to recondition them so they could continue to be useful. The same truth applies to you. Your mindset matters. Open-minded people continually recondition their mind so it remains open. But remember this, a closed mindset is going to leave you where you are, as you are, unchanged. But an open mindset is going to allow you to remain flexible and adaptable and create the opportunities for you to learn and to grow and to become a better version of who you are and what you do. An open mindset creates the space for new thoughts and new ideas to ferment, to grow, and to fully expand. This is how you rise to your full potential. So my challenge to you, be a new wineskin and keep reconditioning yourself so you stay that way. I'm Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.